Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast on true crime in Britain with a sprinkling of the weird and the macabre. Your hosts are me, Bob Dale.
And me, Nadine Roll. We're a couple of friends who met in the pub and we developed a friendship based on our mutual love of booze, podcasts and pub quizzes. We met in the Settle Inn in Stirling and that's where we're recording just now.
So each week we'll both tell a story about something weird and twisted. One long story and one short one. We'll decide who goes first, based
on the flip of a coin.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm alright, yeah. I'm loving this dominoes tournament that's happening in the pub.
The Settle Inn Dominoes League. It's very exciting.
It's exciting. So any noise in the background you hear tonight is people enjoying their doms. Mm-hmm. We've had a pretty exciting week, haven't we?
We've had a really exciting week, especially today.
Yeah, today's been mental.
Finally on Apple Podcasts.
Not iTunes.
Not
Apple Podcasts. So we're live everywhere now, really.
Scary stuff.
Stitcher, TuneIn, Podbean, everywhere. If you can search for Twisted Britain, please do.
Yep.
Give us a rating, give us a review, give us a subscription.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
It means a lot to us. This is just us kind of mucking about in the pub, and if people want to listen to it, we're over the moon. So how's your research gone this week?
Yeah, it's been good. I've really enjoyed it. It's quite a lot of information to rattle through, so you'll have to hold on tight.
I'll bear with you.
Yeah, you're gonna have to.
I'd also like to ask you about the scratch on your forehead.
Right. So today I was out shopping and I was in a big shop that rhymes with Limark, and I was trying.
Okay.
I was trying on a fucking top, right? And as I pulled it over my head, the tag out of nowhere slices me right open. It's bleeding. It's sore. And now I look like a really bad Harry Potter.
Yeah, you didn't even get the lightning. You just got a straight scar.
It's got a little bit of a bed.
Is it the top you're wearing, though?
No, it's not. I didn't even buy it.
You didn't even buy it.
I was so mad. I was in such a bad mood, honestly. It's such a stupid way to get a cut in the middle of my face.
So, my story this week is not the story I was planning on doing. When I saw it on Sunday, I said I had an idea of what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So I started that on my research, and then there was a documentary came up on the television, and I went, "Oh, I want to do that."
Ooh.
And not only is the information right in front of me because it was in a documentary, but it didn't take me too long to look at. It's quite an interesting story, but we'll hear about that in a minute.
Okay. So let's flip the coin.
All right, I'll do it since you don't like flipping it. Hang on.
I'm so
Here we
bad
go.
at it.
Right, call it.
Heads you go.
It's tails. You're up first.
Okay.
I get to sit back and drink.
Alrighty. Are you ready?
Yep, go for it.
So, this is the story of the murder of Charles Walton. Charles Walton was a 74-year-old agricultural worker who had lived in and around Lower Quinton, Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, all of his life. He was a widower who shared a small cottage opposite the village church with his 33-year-old niece, Edith Walton, who he'd adopted 30 years before when her mum had died. He was something of a loner who had earned a reputation as a trainer of horses when he was younger. He wasn't very sociable, but was well liked in the village, even though he was regarded as a bit of an unusual character. People said that birds would flock to be fed from his hand, and he had the ability to tame wild dogs with his voice.
Like Snow White.
Just like Snow White.
Just holding their hands out.
Maybe not as pretty.
Maybe not.
He was known as a real countryman and knew many rural tales and the old ways of the countryside. However, it said some villagers thought he might have been involved with witchcraft because of his strange knowledge and abilities. Ooh, indeed. So, on Wednesday the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, 1945,
right,
he left home with a pitchfork and a slash hook, which is a double-edged pruning implement with a sharp and straight edge on one side and a concave cutting edge on the other. Now, I have a photo of it to show you, which I'll put on Instagram so everyone else can see it.
I'm excited.
It's pretty
a slash hook sounds pretty brutal. Oh yeah, no, it is brutal.
That's a slash hook.
I mean, if you're going to call something by exactly what it looks like,
that'd be it.
That's a slash hook.
That's a slash hook. So, Charles had to walk with a stick because of his rheumatic joints, but sought casual farm work wherever he could find it, and for the previous 9 months had been working for a local farmer called Alfred Potter, whose farm was known as the Firs, F-I-R-S, the Firs.
Like the tree.
Yeah. On this particular day, he was slashing hedges in a field known as Hill Ground, which was on Meon Hill, with an M, not an N. Meon Hill.
Not neon, not where they rave.
No.
Rave in the trees.
Edith Walton, meanwhile, was working as a printer's assembler. Oops, somebody's won the dominoes.
I think somebody's won the dominoes in the background there. Exciting moments here.
Edith Walton, meanwhile, was working as a printer's assembler at the Royal Society of Arts, which had relocated to Lower Quinton for the duration of the war. Edith returned home from work at around 6 p.m. on the day, on 14th of February 1945, and was worried to find that Charles was not there, as he was due to be home around 4 p.m.
Huh.
So, knowing that he wasn't out socialising, being his unsocial self,
Yep.
Edith went to see her neighbour, Harry Beasley. Together they made their way to the Firs to alert Alfred Potter of Charles being missing. Alfred Potter claimed to have last seen Charles earlier in the day slashing hedges in hill ground, so the three of them set out in the direction of the spot where Charles had last been seen.
Okay.
So, when they got there, they found Charles Walton's body by a hedgerow in a pretty awful state. So, he had been beaten over the head with his own stick.
The slasher had been slashed.
Indeed he had. He'd had his neck cut open with the slash hook. And the prongs of the pitchfork had been driven into the ground on either side of his neck, which was pinning him down.
Fuck, that's horrible.
Yeah. The handle of the pitchfork, had then been wedged into the hedge, and the slash hook was left embedded in his neck.
Somebody really meant it then.
Really fucked him up.
Yeah, totally.
Professor Webster of the West Midlands Forensic Laboratory performed the autopsy on Walton and found that his trachea had been cut open, his chest was bruised, and he had several broken ribs. His shirt had been opened, his trousers had been unfastened at the top, and his fly was unbuttoned. There's never anything further than there's nothing about, his trousers being unbuttoned other than in the autopsy report.
He was just taking a pee.
Might have been, maybe, yeah.
He was just slashing the hedges and then needed a slash in the hedges.
Maybe. There was also some defensive wounds. He had a cut on his left hand and bruises on the back of his right hand and forearm. Professor Webster concluded that Walton's wounds had been caused by a stabbing and a cutting weapon, presumably the pitchfork and the slash hook.
Yep.
He had also been hit over the head with his own walking stick, which was found 3.5 yards from his body, with blood and hair adhering to it. Webster concluded that Walton had been killed between 1 and 2 p.m.
Also, right in prime slashing time.
Right, yeah. Slash o'clock, everybody knows.
Slash o'clock.
When Potter, Beasley, and Edith discovered the body, it was said that Edith was overcome. By the way, Potter, Beasley, and Edith sounds like a really shit Harry Potter ripoff.
Yeah, we're going with, is that why you cut yourself today? Because you've done all the research and wanted to be in Harry Potter.
I wanted to be Potter. Let me be Beasley. So Potter, Beasley, and Edith discovered the body, and it was said that Edith was overcome with grief and began to scream loudly. Beasley tried to calm her and made sure she didn't venture too close to the scene. A man named Harry Peachy, great name, happened to be passing on the other side of the hedge. Potter called to him and directed his attention to the body and asked him to go and alert the police. So, it was quickly decided that Potter should stand guard over the murder site until the police arrived, while Beasley took Edith back down the hill. The first policeman on the scene was PC Michael James Lomaisney, I think.
Guard the body is a shit job.
It's a right shit job, isn't it?
Just stand
You
there
stand here.
with that man that's been impaled into the ground.
I'd actually be really scared. See, if you tried to leave me alone with somebody who'd been killed like that, I'd be like, I'd rather not.
I'd be the gentleman and escort her down the hill, I think.
Would you?
Just to get away.
Don't worry, I'll take Edith home.
Edith, come on.
I'll do the hard job.
I'll take you. You don't want to see this. Whereas I don't want to see it.
So PC Michael James Lomaisney, who was from the local police force, arrived at 7:05 to the murder scene. And bear in mind, Edith got home at 6, so it's not been that long.
Alright, sorry. So he would have been normally back at 4.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
But he wasn't.
But nobody noticed till 6 when she got home.
Yeah. And then they went straight up the hill. It's now 7:05, so pretty speedy call out.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Not too bad. Members of Stratford-upon-Avon CID arrived later in the evening, while Professor Webster arrived at 11:30 p.m. and the body was eventually removed at 1:30 a.m.
Right, okay, so the crime scene took quite a while,
up.
But yeah.
Got it all wrapped up. So, at 11 p.m. on the day of the murder, a statement from Alfred Potter was taken. Potter said he'd been at the farm for about 5 years and had known Walton all of that time. He'd employed Walton casually for the last 9 months. He said that Walton worked when he could, which was when the weather was good, really.
Yeah, fair enough. He was in his 70s,
yeah. Walton had been hedging for the last few months, and hill ground was the last field needing attention.
Okay.
Potter said he'd been in the College Arms, which was the local pub, with Joseph Stanley up until noon that day. He had noticed the time as he left the pub, he said, so he knew that.
Go for a couple of pints before slashing.
No bother, yeah. Well, he owned the farm. He wasn't out
Why
doing
not?
slashing.
Yeah.
He had gone straight across to a small field adjoining Hillground, and he saw Walton working about 500 to 600 yards away. So he saw him quite clearly and knew that he knew around midday he was still fine.
Especially if it's like your neighbour's field, you'd see him and be like, oh, there he is.
Oh, that's his field.
It's his field, sorry,
he
yeah.
hired...
yeah, but he'd know who would be working in it, so he'd recognise him quite easily.
Yeah. So a decision to bring in assistance from Scotland Yard was made at quite an early stage. The Deputy Chief Constable of Warwickshire sent a message on the 15th of February, which was the day after the murder.
Yep.
It said, "The Chief Constable has asked me to get the assistance of Scotland Yard to assist on a brutal case of murder that took place yesterday. The deceased man, named Charles Walton, aged 75, and he was killed with an instrument known as a slash hook. The murder was either committed by a madman or one of the Italian prisoners who are in a camp nearby. The assistance of an Italian interpreter would be necessary, I think. Dr. Webster states deceased was killed between 1 and 2 p.m. yesterday. A metal watch is missing from the body. It is being circulated."
Right.
So, on the 16th of February, 2 days after the murder, 1 day after the note was sent,
yeah, absolutely.
assistance arrived in the shape of Chief Inspector Robert Fabian. And I've written down who was the big cheese at the time.
Big Bob Fabian.
Mm-hmm. He's the big cheese.
Yeah, Big Cheese Bob Fabian.
And he brought his partner, Detective Sergeant Albert Webb.
He was the small cheese.
Small cheese. Still cheesing though. Fabian inspired a television series called Fabian of the Yard, making one of the first police heroes on television. Which is quite interesting.
Never even heard of it.
Me neither. Later that day, Detective Sergeant Saunders of Special Branch, who was a fluent Italian speaker, also arrived. PC Low Masoney, who was the local policeman who was the first on the scene, was asked to stay close to Alfred Potter and his wife to see what they might unwittingly reveal. Because him and his wife were friends with Potter and his wife.
Right, okay, yeah.
It's a small town, they're all friends. Meanwhile, Detective Sergeant Saunders began interviews with the Italian World War II prisoners held at Long Marston, which was a prisoner of war camp around a 7-minute drive away from Lower Quinton.
What was the date in...
45.
When in 45 was it?
February.
So the war was still going on?
Yeah.
Right.
Prisoners at this camp seemed to be allowed to roam the area at will, on foot or on bicycle, and although officially there were days on which they were supposed to work in camp and days on which they were free, no record was kept of who was and wasn't in camp.
Really rubbish prison camp.
Seems like a pretty bad idea.
Sounds like a holiday camp more than a prison camp.
Well, on the afternoon concerned, some prisoners had gone into Stratford to see a play, while others had visited the cinema.
Oh, nice cultural trip.
Really nice. However, it does not appear that any of the Italians were ever seriously considered to have killed Walton.
Okay, they're just...
It was just like a...
It's an easy suspect in the area.
Ooh, prisoners. Hold on.
I suppose they were the same as the conscripts here. They weren't the evil ones as such in the war.
No.
They were just doing what they were told to do by their country. So I'm sure there was a camp of very lovely Italian men there. Calm down.
So, Alfred Potter seemed to come under suspicion fairly quickly. So he's the chief that owned the farm. He's not a chief. He just owned the farm.
Right, he was the
was the boss.
Landowner.
Boss man. On the 17th of February, which is now 3 days after the murder, he was interviewed for a second time. Potter stated that he was 40 years old, managed the furs for L.L. Potter & Co., of which his father was the proprietor, and that Walton had usually worked about 4 days each week, but never in wet weather. Potter said he paid him 18 pence per hour. I don't know if that's good or bad.
We could work it out, but...
Yeah, well...
I wouldn't know if it was good or bad anyway. I don't know what a farmer gets paid.
He just was slashing hedges.
Yeah, for 18 pence an hour, sure, I'll do it.
And he was like, he only did a few hours a day.
Oh.
That'd be Hannah.
There's an angry dog in the background. That's not even our theme music. That's just a dog.
Now our theme music's really appropriate.
Yeah, we've nailed it.
Nailed it. Potter said that on the 14th of February, he had left the College Arms, which is the local pub, and gone across to a field known as Cat's Lays, to see to some sheep and to feed some calves. When he reached the field, it was 12:20 p.m, and he then saw Walton, who he said he would have gone over to see, were it not for the fact he had a heifer in a ditch nearby that he needed to attend to.
Okay.
So, He went straight home and arrived there about 12:40 p.m. He then went to attend to the heifer. His story was corroborated by his wife and by his friend who had joined him in the pub earlier that afternoon.
Yep.
On the 20th of February, PC Lomasney was at the Firs and mentioned the fact that the police were still hoping to take fingerprints from the murder weapons. At this, Potter said that he had touched the handle on the slash hook and possibly the pitchfork when he first came across the body and claimed he had already mentioned this to the police.
Well, that's what you do. You just finger everything out.
Touch everything.
Oh, crime scene. I better put my fingerprints everywhere.
Oh, what's that? A pitchfork? Touch.
I wonder what that is.
Touch. He said he had handled the weapons after Beasley had told him to check that Walton was actually dead. He told Lomasney that he thought that one of the Italian POWs was responsible for the murder. That was
like easy out. Yeah.
Easy. So when Edith Walton was interviewed, she told the police that she'd lived with Charles Walton since she was 3 years old when her mother had died, even though her father was still alive.
Right, okay.
Charles must have just been nicer. Walton had given Edith £1 per week for housekeeping, but also paid the rent on the cottage as well as buying their coal and meat. In addition to his casual earnings, Walton received a pension. So he was like,
not too
he
bad.
wasn't a rich man, but he was okay. Edith quoted Potter as saying, "I have to do the milking on a Wednesday. I came to the field to cut some hay at 12 o'clock and saw your uncle at his work." So it sounds like Potter's telling everybody who'll listen, "Oh, I saw him at midday, everything was fine."
Buying himself an alibi everywhere.
Maybe. When Harry Beasley was interviewed, he said that Potter had a reputation as a decent man to work for. Beasley said, Beasley was also an agricultural worker, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Beasley said he was confident that Potter realised Walton was dead from the moment he saw Walton's body, which implies that Beasley didn't actually ask Potter to check if Walton was dead.
Yeah.
Because he's like, it was really obvious that he was...
Yeah, I mean, why would you check if he's pinned to the ground with a pitchfork
and isn't struggling? He's got a slash hook in his neck right now.
Yeah, you don't need to check that.
I'm
pretty sure.
Pretty conclusive.
I don't even know if a paramedic would check that. No. Never mind an agricultural worker.
No. Fabian, who's the detective,
yep,
or chief inspector, whatever, ruled out any money involvement by looking at Potter and Walton's debts and accounts. So he figured out pretty quickly that neither of them had any outstanding debt or anything like that.
Yeah, so there's no reason somebody else could have come and done that. Right?
Yeah. Although Walton was quite skint, it didn't appear as though he'd borrowed or lent any money either. So money didn't seem to really be the motive behind it. A couple of Potter's other employees did, however, say that Potter had struggled to pay their wages on occasion, though.
Okay.
So maybe he wasn't in debt and taking out big loans or anything like that.
But he was just floating head above water.
Yeah, about that. They also ruled out Walton's best friend, because he was really old too, and probably didn't have the strength to kill him in such a way. And also Edith's boyfriend, because Edith had a boyfriend, so they thought, but wasn't him. Statements were also taken from 500 or so residents of Lower Quinton.
Holy shit.
Some as young as 11 years old, as well as other individuals who were in and around the area on the 14th of February 1945. So they were
that's a lot of people.
Yeah, they went for it. A detailed search of the entire area surrounding the murder scene was undertaken with the help of the Royal Engineers using mine detectors in an attempt to find Walton's pocket watch or some other clue, but they found nothing.
So, it almost sounds like a robbery gone wrong.
Maybe. Eventually, Fabian and Webb returned to London, and to this day the murder is still unsolved.
Holy shit.
I'm not even done.
No, you're not.
Rumours that the murder of Charles Walton was tied to witchcraft have always circulated this case.
Yeah.
So although not reported in the autopsy report, several accounts later claimed that a large cross had been carved into Charles Walton's chest.
Ooh.
So in the autopsy he says that his shirt's been opened and his fly was undone and stuff.
But they don't mention any...
But he doesn't say that there was a cross in his chest.
You'd think that would
You'd think you'd put that down, wouldn't you?
Oh, any wound should surely go down. Because if it's carved in, it's still bleeding.
Yeah.
Oh, well, not bleeding because he's dead, but
it's pretty,
it's fleshy.
Quite important.
Yeah, I would say so.
So, it's probably rumour mill, but still good. In historic cases, people seeking their revenge on someone who had cast a spell on them would murder the spellmaker and then mark them with a cross. As in, the Christian cross.
Yeah,
so that was, a thing that they did to witches.
Right, okay.
Another reason witchcraft was thought to have played a part in the murder was that in several other witch killings, pitchforks had been used. You know, the classic, image of you, witch hunt, pitchforks.
Oh, yeah,
and,
burning
fire.
torches and all that, yeah.
So, for example, Anne Tennant, who was an 80-year-old woman who died after being stabbed in the legs and head with a pitchfork. She's a good example of it. This happened around 15 miles away from where Walton lived and was murdered, and about 70 years beforehand. She was killed by James Haywood, who was seen as something akin to a village idiot.
Something akin to. He wasn't quite good enough to be the idiot.
I think everyone just, yeah. It is known that he'd been drinking cider when he attacked Anne without any warning and in view of several witnesses, with a pitchfork.
But, okay, so he's got previous.
No, he just attacked her without any warning.
I mean for the murder. Like, they're saying, look, he's done something like this before.
Well, no, there's a...
Okay,
so in many accounts it has been said that Anne was pinned to the ground with a pitchfork and slashed at with a bill hook. Slightly different to a slash hook, but
choose your hook of choice.
Hook of choice. But this is heavily disputed. Loads of people are like, nah, that's just fabricated because you want it to match Charles Walton's murder. Haywood claimed that Anne was a witch and that there were other witches in the village whom he intended to deal with in the same way. Haywood was found not guilty of murder on the grounds of insanity and spent the rest of his life in Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum, where he died at the age of 59. So it wasn't him, but it's just a murder that happened in a similar place.
Right, yeah.
A while before, but...
The same kind of time.
Yeah, pitchforks and stuff.
Yeah, it's got a lot of tick boxes for the same type of thing.
Also during the investigation, this is good, a member of the police had found a book titled Folklore, Old Customs and Superstitions in Shakespeare Land, which was written by J. Harvey Bloom in 1929.
That sounds like a good book.
Because I want to buy it.
Yeah, I think we should get that off Amazon and read it.
So he wrote it in 1929. Murder happened in 45. In the book, there is a story about a Charles Walton who encounters a phantom black dog on his way home from work on several nights in succession back in 1885,
right?
Which was 60 years previous to Walton's death.
Yep.
And so he would have been 15 at the time.
Oh, of course.
So he would have been alive then, when the story takes place. On the last occasion, the dog is accompanied by a headless woman, and that same night, the Walton, but the Walton in the book, not the one that I'm talking, not my story.
Do we think it's the same Walton?
Well, that's what loads of people say. That same night, the Walton in the book had heard that his sister had died. Rumours that both Charles Waltons are one and the same have always endured, it's always been this, but the book story.
Yeah.
But the police proved it not to be the case by checking against the census and seeing that they had a different number of sisters.
Oh, right, okay.
So they're pretty certain it's
but
not. But it's quite a good coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, having done, I did the family tree years ago for my mum, and censuses are, pretty vague.
Are they?
Yeah, they can be. When you look at the 1911 census compared to the 1901, some people change, their first names, and but it's the same person, it's just how they were known.
Yeah.
So, having another sister in the house could have been I'm totally speculating, it could have been the auntie, but the guy writing it down just wrote it down wrong.
Yeah, oh yeah, maybe.
But honestly, the censuses are a vague idea of who was around.
Could have been him then.
Yeah.
So you never know. So, another tick in the witch box.
Yep.
There are also stories about Meon Hill, where he died, where there's one legend from the 8th century that says that the devil kicked a boulder from the top of the hill, intending to smash the recently built Evesham Abbey. The legend tells that his angry deed was thwarted by the locals' prayers, and the stone instead fell on Cleve Hill just outside Cheltenham. People there then carved the stone into the shape of a cross to rid it of evil from the devil's touch. Pretty good.
Yeah, good.
Another version of this tale says that the devil threw a large clod of earth to smother the newly built abbey. However, the Bishop of Worcester saw the devil, and with the power of prayer altered the devil's aim, and in this version the clod then fell short of its target, and that formed Meon Hill.
Thank God for the power of prayer. Thank God.
Good old Bishop of Worcester and his gnarly prayer.
Not all superheroes wear capes.
Some of them wear dog collars. That's my kind of superhero.
# heroes wear dog collars.
There's also a legend that phantom hounds of the Celtic king Arwen hunt the hill at night. So the king was the lord of departed spirits who would hunt and gather souls. He rode a pale horse and was accompanied by a pack of white hounds with red ears. And for centuries, numerous other sightings of stray black dogs have been reported in the area, which is always superstitious because black dogs are said to be nocturnal apparitions, which are bringers of death and agents of the devil.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you see a stray black dog, it's meant to be super bad luck. It's an agent of the devil.
Worse than the black cat.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, witchy. Pretty witchy.
Pretty witchy.
Pretty spooky hill. Despite having to sift through all of this, Warwickshire police said that they did have a loose suspect for who they think did it. but the case was eventually closed due to a lack of evidence.
Uh,
So, Councillor Mike Brain, a former police officer who lives near the village, said, "It was convenient to blame witchcraft, but the locals knew who had committed the murder. Some will say it's all to do with a domestic situation that went wrong. People in the village knew what happened, but decided they would not talk about it. The investigating officer came up against a brick wall."
right.
A BBC reporter went to the town to interview the locals about Charles Walton's murder in 2014, because people were still, it's a small town, it's like the worst thing that's probably happened there, so they still chat about it.
Yeah.
And it'll be like people's parents
Looking
and stuff.
for a local story type
Yeah.
thing. Let's get something.
So the reporter found the people to be well prepared for questions and felt that they were giving a community response. And the reporter even said, "The people I spoke to were friendly but impenetrably tight-lipped."
It sounds like the village out of...
Are you going to say Hot Fuzz?
I was going to say
Yes,
Hot Fuzz.
The whole time I was writing this, all I could imagine was this weird, like, council of people in cloaks, like...
For their greater good.
The landlord of the College Arms, Tony Smith, told the reporter, "I can't talk to you about that. After 17 years of running this place, I know there are some things we don't talk about. Talking about it would upset people, and there's no sense in alienating people in a small village like this." He added, "There are no relatives of Charles Walton left in the village, and people that might have known him, might have known what happened, are all dead or gone." And Mr. Smith admitted the community was tight-lipped, describing it as watertight, and went on to say, "In cases like this, there's always someone that knows something. Someone knows what happened, but for the sake of relatives and for not upsetting people, no one will say." Mr. Smith was also certain that the murder was not due to witchcraft, but wouldn't say any more on that subject.
Well, it's odd. Like, it's just like a spiral of weird.
And then last bit, Mrs. Wakelon at the village store said, "People don't talk about it. It's a closed subject. Those that would know about it are gone, except one who's in hospital and another that's in a nursing home. All the others have gone or passed away."
So they'll never get to the end. They'll never get to the bottom of this.
No.
You've just done a cold case.
Yeah. Yay!
Hey.
And also it's got witches and stuff like that in it, which is just my favourite. But
Yeah.
I think what happened was, like, I think it's a bit coincidental that he was finally slashing the hedges in the last field that he had to do them. This fella Potter is really shit at paying his employees sometimes. Maybe didn't have any money and was like, he's old, he's got bad joints, probably fight him off. But now you've given me a whole new theory, that is, he caught him taking a slash in the hedgerow and just saw red and just totally wailed on him with the
Get your
slash
cock out
hook.
in this field.
How dare you, sir?
Oh, it's a really sad story. I mean, getting to 75, still working in the field.
Yeah, still doing his thing.
You know, just doing what he can and ending up with a pitchfork in your neck and a slash hook in your neck.
The pitchfork was on either side of his neck, just pinning him down.
I know, but I get that. Oh, mate, I was thinking, like, pitchfork as in, like, a garden fork with, like, 4 prongs on it.
Maybe it was, but it was, like, either side of his head.
Actually, if you think about it, like, the ones they use for tossing bales of hay and
Has it
stuff
only got
like that.
3?
No, it's only got two
is it
spokes
just
on
2?
it. Yeah, it's just like rocking the devil's horn at the top.
There's probably that one then. Either side of the neck, keeping him down.
And that's a really bad story.
Sad, isn't it?
And do you know what's really sad is it's because it's like, 70 years ago now.
Oh, they'll never know.
That's it.
Nah, they'll never know.
That's a
and everyone's like dead and gone and stuff who actually cared. But I think, as everybody seems to imply, the village knows.
Yeah.
They totally know. People totally knew who did it, and we're just keeping Jim.
Yeah, there's the local legend of who done it.
Yeah, me and Matt, when I was writing this earlier, I told Matt about it, and Matt said that he thinks that, like, around the same, that somebody did it, but because it's a small village and everyone's related and stuff, and it's that kind of way.
Almost too related.
You couldn't go and accuse somebody, because if you were like, oh, I think that guy did it, they'd be like, oh, you're calling my dad a murderer?
Right,
What
yeah,
you saying?
okay. Small town mentality. Doesn't help at all.
No, never.
Good story, I like that.
Thanks.
I like a cold case, you know that?
I know you do.
Yeah. I never done an agricultural cold case as well. Good work.
Take a small break, get a drink.
Yeah. Okay, that's the drinks refilled.
Yep.
So, my turn.
Go for it.
So like I said earlier, my story isn't the one I'd planned on doing this week.
Yeah.
But I think you'll like it. It's a bit different, but we'll see how you feel.
Okay.
So this is the story of the Peterhead prison riots.
Oh, nice. I was wanting to do prison riots, but there's a particular one I'm waiting to do.
Right, good. Well, this is my one. There's another one that jumped out at me when I was looking at them, but this was the one that kind of went, like I say, I saw this in the documentary last night. It's called People's History.
Okay.
Actually, well worth a watch on STV.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Peterhead is northern town, Scotland, kind of barren right on the North Sea. So Peterhead Prison was opened in 1888, and it was built as a convict prison. Right, now I kind of thought all prisons were for convicts,
Yeah.
but it turns out, from what I understand anyway, that these are prisoners who have been sentenced to jail in a court of law. Like, rather than just being sentenced to death or whatever, these were convicts. And a lot of the crimes weren't of the serious matter, but
Right.
Peterhead Prison had some of the worst criminals in the country at the time.
Right.
So they were sent to do penal servitude, and I put that in there because I quite like the words penal servitude.
Yeah.
It was originally designed to hold 208 prisoners, but the average occupancy was around 350 people.
Okay.
There was additional buildings built in, added to it on a few different occasions, and in 1962 the capacity became 362. So they kind of got to where the average was by the 1960s. Been open about 70 years by that point.
Right.
Before it was built, all of our convicts were sent south of the border to England. So this was the first time that they were actually building a purpose-built prison for convicts in Scotland.
Okay.
It served two purposes. It was somewhere to house the convicts of Scotland, and the second one was to basically provide a workforce.
Yeah.
They were responsible for building a harbour of refuge in Peterhead. Now, Peterhead, like I say, was right on the coast, and it's grim up there.
Right.
So they were building this huge, long stone jetty out in the ocean to create a safe area of water behind it,
Okay.
so that the boats in the North Sea would have somewhere to safely dock if there was a storm. So they worked building this harbour of refuge, but they also worked in the local quarry. So they were responsible for building the first ever state-owned railway in the UK.
Cool.
But the railway was only used basically to take the convicts from the jail to the quarry to bash stones and back again.
Yeah.
But still the first kind of national railway system that was ever owned by the government. Like I say, it was home to some of the worst criminals in Scotland for the past 100 years. And most of the times, if you were sent there, that was it.
Yeah.
You weren't expected to get out, or you were a bad enough guy that you weren't going to get out anyway.
Right.
It was classed as a Category A high-risk prison. So in 1980, so there've been several riots at this place. It's a prison full of bad bastards. And in 1986, there was a riot broke out in the prison, and there was a massive fire that started in A Wing.
Right.
And over £250,000 worth of damage was caused.
Oh, shit.
Now, that should have been a bit of a precursor, because there'd been a lot of prison unrest in the whole of in kind of Scotland, everywhere.
Yeah.
There was riots in Barlinnie, there'd been riots in Perth Prison, but that was the first kind of big one in Peterhead.
Yeah.
Nobody took very much notice of it, and they just carried on as normal until the next year, 1987. So, like I say, there'd been a building of violence in the prison system in Scotland, and Peterhead was referred to as the hate factory.
Oh, God.
Because of the amount of violence that went out, and it had a reputation for bad disturbances. So on the 28th of September 1987, there'd been an altercation between two of the inmates, and one of them was put on reprimand. Like, he was given a report to the, I'm going to say captain of the prison because I can't, head warden.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is nothing particularly unusual. But that evening, the prisoner managed to get to the officer that had reported him and stabbed him.
Oh, shit.
So the prison officer that got stabbed was helped by a man called Jackie Stewart, who was the prison's disciplinary officer and was the prison's disciplinary officer for 25 years.
Right.
Like, he was part of the prison. He was part of the institution. As soon as he went to help, and he says something like, the whole hall then jumped in.
Oh, no.
So soon all the inmates had escaped from their cells, and the 50 of them took charge of D-Wing.
Oh my god.
D-Wing's quite a big... Like, looking at the pictures online, D-Wing's quite a big place.
Right.
And I suppose it doesn't take 50 people to take charge of somewhere, but there was a couple of leaders.
Yeah.
And they took the 2 prison guards hostage, so the guy that had been stabbed and Jackie. The guy that got stabbed... well, both of them got taken up into the attic space above the prison.
Right.
And got the shit beaten out of them. With table legs, and like they were told to lie on the ground and take a beating.
And he's already been stabbed?
Yeah, he's already been stabbed.
Just leave him be, man. He's been stabbed.
In their... I don't like to say in their defence, but they did let him go.
Okay.
So the guy that had been stabbed and then took a beating was like... They were like, he's fucked. And they let him go.
Oh, well...
They took Jackie, however, and
I bet especially if he's the disciplinary officer, like he's gonna have a lot of people that hate him.
Yeah, indeed. They took him up to the roof, and it was just a wooden roof with slates on the top of it.
God.
And they managed to smash through the roof and gain access onto the roof through a hole that they created. Jackie was dragged across the roof by a couple of the inmates. And paraded around as their hostage in front of the other prison guards and the people in the area.
That must have been absolutely terrifying.
There's actually video clips of it, and you can see the guys absolutely fucking terrified.
You would be, wouldn't you, though?
They lay his head on the parapet part of the wall. They also filled his pockets with lighter fluid.
Oh my god.
Or petrol, some kind of flammable liquid.
Yeah.
And threatened to set him on fire. So he was regularly beaten over the course of 4 days, and at night he was taken back into the roof space. But during the whole day, for 4 days, he was just used as their kind of flag.
That's horrible.
And they beat him. They really fucking beat him at night, and he was starved and not given any water. He says at one point that he shared a blanket with the leader of the prisoners, so that he knew he wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Jackie quotes, "I was paraded along the roof with a chair around my neck and petrol in my pockets." And he was 90 foot off the ground because he considered, do a jump and try and get fucking away from it, but he knew he'd die. Like I say, he was taken off the roof at night. On the 4th day, however, he didn't make an appearance on the roof.
Oh dear.
And they were like, oh shit, something's really bad's happened to Jackie.
Yeah.
So the prison service handed over command to the police. And we're like...
It took 4 days.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I would presume that it would be instantly a police matter.
You'd think so.
But I suppose the prison service...
I mean, surely by the time they're on the roof and they're parading him around and beating him and stuff, you'd be like, we've lost control at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they'd lost control, instantly.
Yeah.
So the police took command, and they quite promptly handed the control over to the military.
Right.
And went, this is beyond us.
Yeah.
So after 5 days of the riot and the prisoners running the jail, essentially, they were in charge of it. Because the other wings could see D block from the windows, and they were like, shit's going down. They could see it. The Home Secretary, Douglas Hurd, ordered the SAS, which is the Special Air Service, for anybody listening that doesn't know who they are. They're basically the most elite fighting force that the British Army have. Yeah. Or the British Air Force have, sorry, but and arguably one of the most elite forces on the planet. Yeah. It was controversial to send the SAS up to deal with a domestic criminal situation. Loads of politicians were like, no, this isn't happening. We're totally against it. But the Home Secretary had decided, and that's what was happening. So originally 2 SAS officers had gone up to kind of oversee the retaking of the prison, but they pretty quickly decided that actually the best thing to do would be just let our boys do it.
Yeah.
So at 5 a.m. on the 5th day, the SAS began their operation. 6 minutes later, they had full control of the jail.
Wow.
And they had Jackie Stewart in their care.
Oh, that's so good. 6 minutes?
6 minutes.
I can hardly even walk from here to the bar in 6 minutes, let alone
totally.
take back a prison.
So this next stuff's been taken from kind of an elite forces summary of what they do on operations
Right.
website, whether it's fully accurate or not.
Yeah.
I did find an SAS second in command that had been on location that has basically kind of corroborated what this stuff says. But
Yeah.
So 1 4-man force went to the roof, and 1 went to each of the 3 floors on D-Wing. They all blew holes to get in to the wing simultaneously and threw CS gas and stun grenades in,
Oh, shit.
causing confusion and allowing them to the team on the roof to abseil in, pin Jackie down, and take the entire place in 6 minutes.
Holy shit.
They did things like they wore trainers instead of army boots so they could move more stealthily.
Nice.
And they were only armed with batons because they weren't there to kill anyone.
Yeah.
They had backup pistols on them, 9mm pistols anyway, just in case they needed them. But they were obviously there to go, nah, we'll just take this back and you guys go back in your cells.
Yeah.
Jackie said, I only saw 1 SAS man. I just said to him that I was the officer. I was in prison clothing and he accepted that. But he'd probably had pictures of me and the prisoners beforehand.
Yeah.
So, like I say, they went in with stun grenades and gas grenades, and it was the first, and it says only time, that they've been used in a domestic siege on mainland Britain. Now, I don't think that's true, because the SAS were used in the Iranian embassy siege as well.
Okay.
But I think what they meant was, like, the first domestic siege against British people.
Right.
One of the SAS officers, Peter Ratcliffe, who was second in command on the actual operation, says that sending us in was a political thing. Thatcher, Malcolm Rifkin and Douglas Hurd just wanted to send out a message because there'd been riots in other prisons. I suppose it's one of those things you don't forget. Well, I didn't forget because I was playing squash for the army in Portsmouth and I had to cancel it, so it ruined my weekend. But it was a short job, less than 12 hours. We were back in Hereford for in time for second breakfast.
That's amazing.
I love that. Jackie said he got through it all by being thrawn and determined. He got 6 weeks off work after the siege, but then he went back to be one of the... He went back to work as the disciplinary officer.
Good for him.
And when the the prison was finally closed down, in I think it was 2006 it was closed down to build a new kind of super prison.
Yeah.
They kept Peterhead open as a museum, and you can still go to this day to the museum.
That's so cool.
It'd be a cool visit.
Yeah, I'd love
let's go
to
and record
go.
a podcast there.
Yes.
So Jackie still went in his prison uniform and like as an old guy and gave talks to people and told them all about the siege and how he survived it and that he was the right man to be taken hostage.
Right.
And loads of other people have said that Jackie, like if you were going to take one hostage and expect them to survive the ordeal, Jackie was the guy to do it. I think honestly, see, like there's footage. We'll maybe post it on Twitter and Facebook. Some of the footage of him being interviewed. He's just brilliant. You'll love him. He's just amazing. I think he's one of my favourite men ever.
Bloody hell.
So that's the story of Peterhead Prison.
That's really cool. That was good. I like that.
Yeah, it's like I said to you earlier, a bit different from what I was thinking of doing originally, but yeah, cool story.
That was really good. I like a good prison riot story.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear yours now.
Oh, you'll know it. The instant I mention it, you'll know exactly what I'm going to start going on about.
I might have to take it off my list of things that we're going to talk about there. So, yeah, once again, thank you for listening.
Yep, thank you.
We'll apologise again because it has been a loud night in the pub.
Yeah, it's been really noisy.
We tried our best to kind of cut out the best bit, the worst bits even. keep the best. That's us. We're the best bits. But if you like what you heard, please do subscribe.
You can do it on Apple Podcasts now, and please leave a little review as well. It means a lot to us to hear your thoughts on what we talk about, how we talk about it, just your general thoughts on how your day's been, if you feel like it.
Yeah. Tell us how you feel. You'll find us on Facebook
at Twisted Britain.
You'll find us on Twitter
at Twisted Britain,
and you'll find us on Instagram
at Twisted Britain.
We also have a website,
twistedbritain.co.uk.
And we would appreciate a like, a follow.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do on Instagram.
You like and follow.
Like and follow.
Love and follow.
You can love us all. Yeah.
You can also listen on Stitcher and Podbean and tune in.
And
on our website.
And on our website, wherever you choose to listen, please do just subscribe. We'll be talking rubbish for the next, forever, I think.
Yeah, hopefully. And there'll be like slight changes maybe along the way. Just now the intro and outro music is done by my partner Matt Johnson, who is better known as the Narcissist Cookbook when he's doing his musical thing.
Thanks, Matt.
We might have new music at some point. We might have a new logo at some point. It's all exciting. It's all happening.
Stick with us. We're making this up as we go along. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.